What would you identify as probably the main factors as like a rise in nonprofits as just a sector in general? I guess just some pointers. I guess there's a value, like market value of government size. Government has gotten smaller in the past few years or the past few decades.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that's just a natural thing where like, okay, government gets smaller, then nonprofit comes to step in? Or do you think there's a moral conviction that's changed in the past, let's say 40, 50 years, that lead people to volunteer their time more often?
I just think I'm going to go back to St. Jordan Peterson. It's where there's been responsibility. Is it abdicated? Is that the right word?
Yeah.
People are likely to step forward and take it. So I don't think it's necessarily in anyone's intention, but it's what's happened fundamentally down to human nature. It's just like, yeah, if you don't take charge, someone else will. And then when they see that there's let's put it in a tribal setting, right? If you see that the leader of your tribe is slowly becoming less and less competent, you're eventually going to replace him.
Mm.
Or if you particularly like him, you might keep him up there as a symbolic model, and then do all of the actual responsibilities required of that symbolism. So yeah, that would be as far as my answer can really go on that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah. Well, of course, I guess no one can like definitively answer the question. So yeah, I guess back to I guess we want to touch upon again the I guess the nature of altruism and how is that like, is it at all? I don't know if we touched on it, but we didn't really pick it apart in detail.
Yeah.
What means are there to increase that temperament? Because of course, different individuals have different temperaments towards empathy and things. So do you think it's a role of teaching, or do you think it should be like a laissez-faire, like leave it as is, and those who are more altruistic will just sort of take the spotlight?
I think it's about if you're going to have an organization that's altruistic, is to put the people who have the personality traits appropriate for that higher up in the organization. Because you can have someone who's like conscientious, for example, not massively agreeable, so not altruistic by much of an extent, but you can have that person working in the organization doing something extremely productive, which will overall be altruistic, but that may not necessarily be the trait intention. So I don't think the approach would be to teach altruism. Like, have you ever tried to, teach kids to share? It's like good luck. Right, but try and teach adults that don't want to share. Even worse, they think they've got the world in their hands. Yeah, so it's just
sorry, go ahead.
It's just about allocating correct position in relation to trait, and it would obviously help if people knew their traits.
But would you say there is a wiggle room almost within people's temperaments that could lean towards more favorable personality distributions, as one might put it?
No, it's pretty, personality is pretty stable,
right?
You can obviously increase openness as a trait through like really profound experience, like the use of psychedelics. That's the only really movable trait. You'll obviously individuals will move as they go from children to teens to fully developed adults. But once you're there, you're pretty temperamentally fixed. You can learn like the traits and you can practice them, but you're not going to fundamentally move too much on your scale. So yeah, I'd say that would be the wrong approach to try and teach altruism. The better way to do it, I've actually thought this, it would be to have so if you have people already role models for various reasons, say they're role models because they're competent in their field, and then you attach altruism to that pre-existing identity. When people look up, because everyone has a role model, they have people that they aspire to be like, and that's just such a human sense. You look at someone admirable and you're like, wow. And if you added altruism to people like that in a position of the spotlight, practiced altruism, then the knockoff effect down society would be more profound, because they'd look up and they'd be like, okay, if I want to be more like this person, I'm going to replicate some of their behaviors. I'm going to imitate. That's how children learn. That's how adults learn as well. And so it's, yeah, I'd say that's the better option, to have virtuous people as role models. And then that's the best way to influence people. You can't just tell someone, hey, you've got to, you've got to be nicer to people, or like whatever. It's not going to work like that.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that for adults, definitely. Oh, it seems that, of course, it's more rigidified, if that's a word, like solidified, as adults. And of course, no one wants like a massive authority saying, hey, do this, hey, do this.
Yeah.
But when you say that, of course, I guess going back to the psychological element, if someone, for example, grows up in a house where being kinder or giving more tends to produce results or more favorable results, as opposed to as a person who grows up in a household who has a less favorable outcomes from being kind and giving. When you say that, even given the same genetic component of personality, they would go onto different paths in terms of their attitude to altruism.
I think, well, okay, let me ask you a question so we can clarify the question a little bit. So by altruism, if we're looking at altruism in children, what does a child understand by altruism? What traits would you associate? Like, what is the child doing to know that they are being altruistic? Well, maybe not to know, but how are they acting?
Sharing. So just sharing and, well, yeah, ultimately just sharing toys, sharing the play equipment.
Yeah, well, I think that's already pretty ingrained in education of children. Like, I don't think if you pushed it harder, you just lose the actual meaning. People get sick of things that are repeated or cliched. So it's like, yeah, I think it's pretty ingrained in the system already. Like, if you go, I did work experience in a nursery, so children under 4 is very much, let this child have a go of that, and then they'll return it to you, and then it's all about cooperation. So I think the extent that we can maximize that is being pretty well fulfilled, which I mean is an optimistic point of view, because if it's already being fulfilled, that's one thing we don't have to look at.